I feel like every gamer I talk to has a Star Wars game from their past that each swear is the best Star Wars game ever made. Whether that's Rogue Squadron, Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, or Knights of the Old Republic, they're all the best and it's obvious why. Well, I have one too, and you might have heard of it. It's The Force Unleashed 2. Just kidding. It's obviously Star Wars Empire at War, a real-time strategy game from 2006 developed by Petroglyph Games and published by LucasArts. Set in the period between episodes 3 and 4, you play as the Rebellion or Empire in battles in land or in space. It features skirmish modes, a campaign, and another mode called Galactic Conquest, which is the standout of the bunch. You take control of planets and systems, grow your tech tree, and gain resources all on a galaxy-wide scale while fighting individual battles in real time. Empire at War was graced with an expansion called Forces of Corruption. It has strong mod support, which meant for an even longer lifespan further into the future. It's one of my favourite strategy games I've ever played, so let's dive in and see what made it so great. Thinking back to 2006, the strategy game landscape was far different than it was today. With more popular genres rising to prominence over the last decade, the classic strategy game has become a bit of an oddity in today's gaming scene. Browsing the genre on Steam, the closest you'll find to the ones of old are series that have been established players for a long time, such as Civilization, Anno or Total War, but you don't really see many new series taking up the mantle that has been held since the dawn of PC gaming. 12 years ago, however, the genre was as popular as ever, and it was also around this time we got some developers deciding to change things up in it. Games like Company of Heroes in 2006 and World in Conflict in 2007 showed that strategy games didn't need to be limited to building bases and clashing massive armies. They could deliver action where every unit felt critical to victory, or show that flashy graphics and effects weren't just for big budget AAA adventures. So when Star Wars Empire at War was released in February of 2006, which was before both previously mentioned games, it brought with it a fresh spin on the strategy genre that proved to be a hit with fans looking for something other than the traditional fare. For people like me, it also felt like somewhat of a spiritual successor to Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, an Age of Empires-like strategy game released 5 years earlier in 2001. While it was quite different gameplay-wise, getting a new Star Wars strategy game was something that I and many others were eager to get our hands on. At the core of Empire at War's gameplay are two things: land and space. In a way, the game actually packs two separate games into one product. At the base level, you choose to either battle on a planet's surface or above it, choosing either the Empire or Rebellion as your faction. Each are different in their own way. While the factions do feel a bit samey in the way of having equivalent units at each research tier, the land and space battles feel vastly different in the way they play and provide a lot of elements to make playing both enjoyable. On the ground, it's a more traditional strategy game. You have a base and a research technology and units to get a more powerful ground force, but it differs itself in other ways. For example, units don't just appear in front of a building when they're complete. Instead, you have to call them in at specific landing zones around the map that must be captured with friendly units before utilising them. It's a smart system that pushes players from turtling the whole game. You need to expand in order to claim a victory. This is because the resource gathering uses the same system. There are mining camps and tactical structures around the map that require friendly units in their immediate area to be captured. And it makes for a game that feels very fast as players are constantly trying to push through and capture the next critical point. These mechanics, combined with the map size and aggressive AI, make for a game with very little downtime that requires you to think on your toes the whole way through. The only thing that really negatively stands out for land battles is their graphical quality. When using the battle cam, which is the game's cinematic camera mode that attempts to make the game look like a movie, you can really see that the level of detail is lacking, even for a game that came out in 2006. Space battles aren't quite as noticeable as the units and scale is a lot bigger, but on land, things like unit helmets and weapons look hilariously blocky. But apart from the ultimately minor graphical gripes, Empire at War's land battles offer a fast-paced game that's sure to please. Space battles, however, are different altogether. While ones that land are fast with little downtime, these vary from games that are slow and tactical to ones that have quick and decisive outcomes. Contrary to the maps on the planet's surface that can feel rather cramped, the ones in the void above feel large and expansive, which is helped by the sluggish nature of a lot of the larger ships. The basic gameplay is similar. You have to capture points on a map for gathering resources and building turrets, and you have a home base and a portion of the map, which in this case is a space station instead of an entire base on the ground. You call in troops the same way, except that they can be called in nearly anywhere on the map as long as you have friendlies in the area. This means you can do things like call in Star Destroyers mid-battle to bolster your forces, or sneak in a stealth fighter behind the enemy station just to call in an army of heavy bombers and obliterate it before the enemy has a chance to counterattack. A great mechanic used in space battles is hardpoints. What these are targetable zones on larger ships and stations that allow for systematic destruction of enemy vessels, and gives multitudes of options for how you can approach the situation. For example, take out the capital shields and you won't have to worry about them recharging until they've been destroyed. Or take out the engines and watch them move around at a snail's pace while you maneuver behind them to stay out of their firing arc. There's even options to take out individual laser and torpedo batteries to weaken their firepower. This mechanic is such a great addition and adds a whole new layer to combat. Friendly ships will even say specific voice lines when targeting specific hardpoints, which adds a nice layer of immersion to the whole thing. Something space battles do a lot better than their counterparts are allowing real tactics to influence the outcome of a battle, and even the entire match. It's not always just about bringing the most guns and biggest cruisers to a battle. You need to think about your force makeup and have a plan if you want to have the best chance of succeeding. For example, if you bring massive capital ships into battle with no fighter cover, enemy bombers will tear your ships apart while avoiding most incoming heavy laser fire and carving them up hardpoint by hardpoint. Having both the space and land battles available in the game gives a lot of variety. Both have separate units and structures, and heroes have different versions and abilities depending on where you deploy them. Darth Vader, for example, flies his TIE Advanced in space battles while wielding his lightsaber on the ground. It also gives the game an opportunity to make the most of its lore, not having to choose between only showcasing Star Destroyers or AT-ATs, but instead being able to not only do both but also have a fully fleshed out roster for each faction. When choosing a game mode, the game gives you multiple choices depending on your preference. For short, one-off battles, you can skirmish on a variety of maps either on land or space, whether against computer-controlled bots or other players. If you're wanting a true Star Wars experience, then there's full campaigns for both the Empire and Rebellion that tell their own unique stories, with familiar characters and fully voiced dialogue. But out of all of Empire War's offerings, my favourite is definitely the grand campaign called Galactic Conquest. It plays similarly to campaigns in the Total War series. There's a large map where you build and grow infrastructure, construct units, and research advanced technology. Instead of land masses like in Total War, however, you control planets across the entire galaxy, fighting for control on the ground and space above in tactical battles that play out like the game's skirmish modes. It plays in the similar style to the campaign, except there's no narrative and story to tie you up and dictate the pace of the game. Instead, you're free to go about conquering the galaxy as you see fit. Depending on what map you choose, the game starts you with a select number of planets and friendly troops and sets you on your way, with the simple goal of eradicating your enemy. It's a great mode that really captures the scale of a galactic war, and tactically deploying fleets of Star Destroyers or legions of stormtroopers across the galaxy really puts you in the commander's chair to great effect. It's an excellent addition to the game and will keep you entertained for a while, as the entire conquest can take a long time as you'd expect, especially when you ramp up the difficulty if you're looking for a real challenge that's satisfying the whole way through. Empire at War received one expansion in the same year it was released. Forces of Corruption added a new faction with an accompanying campaign, plus new maps and also new units for the existing sides of the Empire and Rebellion. It also brought changes to the game itself, such as allowing all three factions to battle each other on one map, adding a new corruption mechanic, and a new mechanic for building outposts in land battles. The campaign follows Tiber Zan, crime lord of the appropriately named Zan Consortium, and his conquest following the events of the original Star Wars and up to the destruction of the second Death Star. The new faction contains all new units for both land and space battles. Land additions are as you'd expect with tanks, troops and transports, but it's the space ones that stand out to me. They seem a lot more creative with different abilities and setups than what we've had before. The Consortium's Aggressor-class destroyer, for instance, houses two massive cannons, one for taking out shields and one traditional one for destroying hulls. They fire in sequence, and if one misses then it's a lot more ineffective, and losing one permanently if someone destroys your hardpoint is even worse. Another ship, the Vengeance-class frigate, has super thick armour but no shields, and holds two mass driver cannons that tear through enemy ships while bypassing their shields. Things like this make combat a lot more interesting and can provide opportunities to utilise more tactics in battle rather than just "I'll bring more guns." Overall, it was a great expansion that logically added to the existing content in Empire at War, and it's a shame they didn't receive any more. Whenever you talk about a Star Wars game, the question of the game's audio and visual experience is always brought up. Does it feel like Star Wars? Does it sound like Star Wars? Does it look like Star Wars? When making a game in this universe, not only does the developer have to do their best to make it good, it also has to feel authentic. Sometimes a game goes too hard in one direction, such as 2015's Star Wars Battlefront. It had great atmosphere, graphics and sound, and was the most authentic feeling Star Wars game ever made. In doing that, however, the developers forgot to make the other half of the game, leading to an experience that looks and sounds amazing, but lacked enough depth to keep people around for very long. In this respect, I think Empire at War nails it. It's a great strategy game on its own merits, with enjoyable gameplay and enough content to keep players entertained for many hours. It also looks and sounds like a Star Wars game due to the recognisable characters, locations and soundtrack. Even less obvious things like the menu buttons and UI feel Star Warsy. The result is a great Star Wars game that feels like it was made to be just that, not just a cash in on the license or another game that was reskinned to look like Star Wars. Empire at War doesn't just have the looks of Star Wars, it has the heart as well. Like many great PC games, the experience doesn't end with what was shipped on the disc. The modding community for Empire at War is big, and community members have brought a multitude of different franchises into the fray. With total conversions for Halo, Stargate and Battlestar Galactica to name a few, there's even a mod called Sci-Fi Award that throws all of them into one big mosh pit. Some of the most popular mods for the game are actually ones that take the game into different time periods in the same Star Wars universe, such as the Old Republic or the Clone Wars. There's also a good bunch of reworks or remakes for the base game itself, ranging from ship and balance tweaks to graphical updates. There's a ton of variety in what's available for Empire at War once you're done with the base game, whether you're looking for a whole new franchise or just a shift in the Star Wars timeline. Hilariously, if you're looking for a great strategy game set in another franchise's universe like Stargate for example, your best bet might just be to buy Empire at War and download a mod that takes you there. The beauty of Empire at War is that it pulls you in whether you love Star Wars or you just love strategy games. If you're in the first camp, then boot it up and you'll be hooked by how the game nails the feel of it all. And if you just want a good strategy game to play, then the game delivers without requiring players to be that invested in the Star Wars universe. The peak though was for players that both love Star Wars and love strategy games. I loved Age of Empires when I was a kid, and other games like Stronghold and Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, and played a ton of them when I was younger. And when I first saw Empire at War, I was hooked. The game's quality was something I'd just never seen before, and the fact that it was Star Wars made me all the more interested. Something that I'm always impressed about with this game is that how playable it is whenever I decide to boot it up again. The gameplay holds up and it's still probably the best Star Wars strategy game available today, even after all this time, 12 years after release. What's even better is that it's available on Steam with full relaunched multiplayer support, so it's easily accessible for anyone who's interested or people who used to play it back in the day. For years now, me and a friend have been going back to Empire at War to relive that experience we found in 2006, and to this day, it's something we haven't been able to find anywhere else. Thanks for watching.